The warning lights painted Commander Sarah Chen's face red as alarms screamed through the cramped cockpit of the exploration vessel Wanderer. She gripped the control stick with both hands, fighting to keep the ship steady as it shuddered and bucked like an angry horse. "Come on, baby, hold together," she muttered through gritted teeth, her brown eyes scanning the dashboard where half the indicators flashed angry warnings. The fusion drive had failed 3 hours ago, leaving her drifting in the void between star systems with only emergency thrusters. Sarah had been alone in deep space for 6 months, charting new trade routes for the human colonial authority. It was dangerous work that most people avoided, but she loved the freedom of the empty darkness between worlds. Now that freedom might kill her. The ship's computer spoke in its calm, artificial voice. "Commander Chen, structural integrity at 60% and falling. Hull breach detected in sections 4 through 7. Recommend immediate emergency landing." "Where exactly am I supposed to land out here?" Sarah snapped, wiping sweat from her forehead. Through the viewport she could see nothing but stars and the distant glow of a nebula. "Scanning for suitable worlds," the computer replied. A few seconds passed before it continued. "One planet, detected within emergency thruster range. Ketha Prime bearing 27 Mark IV. Sarah's blood went cold. She knew that name. Every human pilot did. "Computer, confirm that reading. Did you say Ketha Prime?" "Confirmed. Ketha Prime is the only world within our current operational range. Show me the navigation warnings for that system." The main screen flickered to life, displaying a star chart. Ketha Prime appeared as a small dot surrounded by flashing red symbols. Text scrolled across the bottom. "Forbidden. Quarantine zone. Approach prohibited by Galactic Council Decree 2847. Violation punishable by immediate termination." Sarah stared at the screen for a long moment. She had heard stories about Ketha Prime in the bars and trading posts where pilots gathered. It was the homeworld of the Cathani, a warrior race so dangerous that the entire Galactic Council had united to quarantine their planet 10,000 years ago. The stories said the Cathani had nearly destroyed 3 star systems before they were finally stopped. Another alarm joined the chorus as the ship shook harder. The computer's voice remained maddeningly calm. "Hull integrity now at 40%. Recommend immediate course correction to Ketha Prime." Sarah closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She could try to reach another system, but the Wanderer was falling apart around her. The emergency beacon would take weeks to reach the nearest human outpost, and she would be dead long before help arrived. "Plot a course for Ketha Prime," she said quietly. "Warning: Ketha Prime is designated as a forbidden zone by Galactic Council authority. Landing is prohibited." "I don't care what the Council says. I'll be dead if I don't land somewhere." Sarah's fingers flew over the controls, activating the emergency thrusters. "Plot the course, computer." Course plotted. Estimated time to arrival: 4 hours, 17 minutes. The next few hours passed slowly. Sarah ran diagnostics, sealed what hull breaches she could, and tried not to think about what might be waiting for her on the forbidden world. The stories about the Cathani were probably exaggerated, she told herself. After 10,000 years, there might be nothing left alive down there at all. As Ketha Prime grew larger on the screen, Sarah got her first clear look at the legendary world. It was smaller than Earth, with 2 small moons and rings of space debris that might once have been artificial satellites. The planet's surface was a patchwork of brown and gray, with no sign of the blue oceans or green continents that marked a living world. "Beginning atmospheric entry," the computer announced. The ship began to shake as it hit the thin atmosphere. Sarah fought the controls, trying to find a safe place to land. Through the viewport, she could see the planet's surface rushing up to meet her. Much of the land looked like it had been turned to glass, smooth and reflective under the light of the system's orange sun. "What happened here?" Sarah whispered. She found a relatively flat area, near what might have been a city long ago, and brought the Wanderer down hard. The landing gear collapsed on impact, and the ship skidded across the rocky ground before finally coming to rest against a low hill. Sarah sat in the sudden silence, her heart pounding. The alarms had finally stopped, and The only sound was the gentle hiss of air recyclers. She was alive, but she was also stranded on the most forbidden world in known space. After running a quick systems check, Sarah put on her environmental suit and stepped outside. The air was thin but breathable, with a metallic taste that reminded her of old coins. The landscape around her was desolate and strange. The ground was covered with a fine layer of dark sand, and the hills in the distance looked like they had been carved by weapons rather than weather. The ruins of what had been a vast city stretched to the horizon. Most of the buildings had been reduced to melted glass and twisted metal, but some structures still stood like broken teeth against the orange sky. Everything was silent except for the wind whistling through the wreckage. Sarah walked slowly among the ruins, her boots crunching on broken glass. She had seen war damage before, but nothing like this. Whatever had happened here, it had been thorough and terrible. The very rock seemed to have been changed by some unimaginable heat. "Hello?" she called out, feeling foolish. Her voice echoed off the broken buildings and faded into the wind. Of course, there was no answer. After 10,000 years, there could not be anything alive in this wasteland. But as Sarah turned to head back to her ship, she noticed something that made her stop. Deep in the ruins, partially hidden by collapsed buildings, metal surfaces gleamed with an oily rainbow sheen. It was not the dull metal of wreckage, but something that still held power. She made her way carefully through the rubble toward the strange gleaming. As she got closer, she could see that it was some kind of technological installation, partially buried, but clearly still functional. Lights pulsed slowly along its curved surfaces, and she could hear a faint humming sound. "What are you?" Sarah murmured, kneeling beside the device. The moment her gloved hand touched the metal surface, everything changed. The humming grew louder, and lights began flashing in patterns across the installation. Deep underground, Sarah could hear the sound of massive machinery coming to life. She jerked her hand back and stumbled away from the device, but it was too late. All around her, the ruins began to glow with the same rainbow light. More installations revealed themselves, rising from the sand where they had been hidden. The air filled with electronic sounds and the distant rumble of awakening systems. "Computer malfunction," Sarah said aloud, trying to convince herself. "Some kind of automatic response to contact." But even as she spoke, she knew she was wrong. This was not a malfunction. This was a defense system, and she had just activated it. Sarah ran back toward her ship, but before she could reach it, the ground began to shake. A section of the city that had seemed completely destroyed began to change. Buildings that were nothing but melted glass started to reshape themselves, flowing upward like water running in reverse. Metal beams straightened and reconnected. Broken windows became whole again. In the center of the rebuilding area, something large was rising from deep underground. It was a structure unlike anything Sarah had ever seen, tall and organic-looking, despite being made of metal and crystal. As it emerged from the earth, the orange sunlight caught its surfaces and threw dancing patterns across the ruins. The building's completion triggered another response. All across the city, similar structures began rising from their buried resting places. Within minutes, the dead landscape had become a forest of alien architecture, all of it humming with renewed power. Sarah reached her ship and scrambled up the damaged hull to the airlock. Inside, she ran for the communication console and activated the emergency beacon. "This is Commander Sarah Chen of the exploration vessel Wanderer," she said into the transmitter. "I have made emergency landing on Keitha Prime. The planet is not as dead as we thought. I repeat, something is waking up down here." She sent the message on all frequencies and then sat back in her pilot's chair, staring out at the transformed landscape. The forbidden world had been sleeping for 10,000 years, but her touch had awakened it. As the twin moons rose in the darkening sky, Sarah wondered if she had just made the biggest mistake in human history. The Galactic Council had forbidden this world for good reasons, and now those reasons might be stirring in the depths of the rebuilt city. But there was nothing she could do about it now. Her ship was damaged beyond her ability to repair, and her beacon would take days or weeks to reach anyone who could help. Until then, She was alone on Keitha Prime with whatever she had awakened. Sarah checked her suit's power supply and weapon charge, then settled in to wait. She had always known that exploring the unknown was dangerous work. She had just never imagined it might be dangerous for the entire galaxy. Outside her ship, the alien city hummed with growing power, and deep in its heart, something that had slept for millennia began to stir. The course of galactic history had just changed forever, and it had all started with one human's desperate need to land somewhere safe. The night was going to be very long. Sarah woke to the sound of metal footsteps outside her ship. She jerked upright in the pilot's chair where she had dozed off, her hand automatically reaching for the plasma pistol on her belt. The footsteps were heavy and deliberate, moving around, the wanderer in a slow circle. Through the viewport, she could see that the alien city had continued rebuilding itself during the night. Spires of dark metal now reached toward the orange sky, and streams of energy flowed between them like luminous rivers. The air itself seemed to shimmer with power. The footsteps stopped directly outside the airlock. Sarah held her breath and listened. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then came a sound that made her blood freeze, a voice speaking in a language she had never heard, deep and resonant, like an earthquake given form. Sahalni Kathara, Veltan Zekmor. The words seemed to shake the ship's hull. Sarah's translation computer beeped softly and displayed text on her screen. Unknown language, insufficient data for translation. The voice spoke again, closer now. Human, I know you are within. Sarah's eyes went wide. Whatever was outside could speak Standard Galactic, the common language used for trade between species. She thought about staying silent, but if it already knew she was there, hiding would do no good. I can hear you, she called out, trying to keep her voice steady. Who are you? I am Zethkar, last warrior of the Cathani. You have awakened me from the long sleep. Why have you come to the dead world? Sarah stood slowly and moved to the viewport. What she saw outside made her gasp. The being that called itself Zethkar was massive, standing nearly 12 feet tall on legs like tree trunks. Its body was covered in natural armor that looked like polished black stone, and it had 4 arms, instead of 2. 2 of the arms ended in hands with long, clawed fingers, while the other 2 seemed to be built for gripping weapons. But it was the warrior's face that truly shocked her. The head was roughly humanoid but larger, with eyes that glowed a soft blue in the shadow of heavy brow ridges. Scars covered every inch of visible skin, some old and pale, others looking fresh despite the creature's obvious age. Zethkar was clearly dying. The great warrior swayed on his feet, and Sarah could see dark fluid seeping from wounds along his torso. His breathing was labored, and the blue glow in his eyes flickered like a candle in the wind. You are injured, Sarah said, forgetting her fear for a moment. 10,000 years of sleep do not heal all wounds, Zethkar replied. I was dying when the machines put me in the cold dark. I am still dying now. He tilted his massive head to study her through the viewport. You are very small. Are all humans so tiny? We're not the biggest species in the galaxy, Sarah admitted, but we get by. Indeed. You are the first to set foot on Keitha Prime since the quarantine began. Your people must be very brave or very foolish. Probably both, Sarah said. My ship was damaged. This was the only place I could land. Zethkar made a sound that might have been laughter, though it rumbled like distant thunder. So you came to the Forbidden World by accident, the galaxy's greatest fear, and you stumbled into it looking for a repair dock. The massive warrior took a step closer to the ship, then stumbled. Sarah watched in alarm as he fell to one knee, one of his 4 hands pressed against his side where the dark fluid was flowing more freely. You need medical attention, Sarah said. I need death. Zethkar replied quietly. But death has been slow in coming. Sarah looked at the dying warrior through her viewport and made a decision that would change everything. She had emergency, medical supplies, and despite his frightening appearance, Zethkar had not tried to attack her. In fact, he seemed more tired than dangerous. I have medical supplies on my ship, she said. I could try to help. Zethkar's glowing eyes fixed on her. You would aid a Kethani? Do you not know what we are? I know what the stories say, that your people were warriors who fought the entire galaxy and lost. The stories are not wrong, but they are not complete either. Zethkar struggled to stand again. Why would you help someone like me? Sarah was quiet for a moment, thinking. Because you're hurt, and I can help. It's that simple. The great warrior stared at her for a long time. Simple, he repeated softly. When did anyone last call anything about the Kethani simple? Sarah cycled through the airlock and stepped outside, her medical kit in one hand and her plasma pistol in the other. She kept the weapon lowered but ready as she approached Zethkar. Up close, the warrior was even more impressive. His natural armor was scarred from countless battles, and some of the marks looked like they had been made by energy weapons powerful enough to crack stone. But Sarah could also see that he was clearly in pain. May I examine your wounds? She asked. Zethkar nodded slowly and lowered himself to the ground so Sarah could reach him. I have been alone for so long, he said quietly. I had forgotten what it was like to speak with another living being. Sarah opened her medical kit and began scanning Zethkar's injuries with a portable diagnostic unit. The readings made her frown. These wounds are old, but they're getting worse. Some kind of energy poisoning in your system. Plasma burns from the last battle, Zethkar explained. My people fought with weapons that burned hotter than stars. Some wounds never heal. Sarah began cleaning the worst of the injuries with disinfectant. Zethkar flinched but did not pull away. Tell me about the last battle. What happened here? Madness happened, Zethkar said, his voice growing distant. A plague swept through our worlds, making us rage-blind and violent. We fought everyone, including each other. When the madness finally broke, there were so few of us left. The stories say your people tried to conquer the galaxy. The stories are told by the winners. Zethkar winced as Sarah applied healing gel to a particularly deep wound. We were not conquerors. We were desperate survivors trying to find a cure for the plague that was destroying our minds. Sarah paused in her work. A plague? The Galactic Council records say the Kethani were aggressive by nature. The Council says many things, not all of them are true. Zethkar's 4 hands clenched into fists. They quarantined us not because we were dangerous, but because they feared what we might become if we were healed. What do you mean? Before Zethkar could answer, alarms began wailing from Sarah's ship. She looked up to see red warning lights flashing on the Wanderer's hull. What is that? Zethkar asked. Sarah ran back to her ship and checked the long-range sensors. What she saw on the screen made her heart sink. A dozen ships were approaching Ketha Prime, their energy signatures marking them as Galactic Council vessels. We have company, she called to Zethkar. Council ships probably responding to my emergency beacon. The great warrior struggled to his feet. They come quickly. Someone must have been watching for any activity on Ketha Prime. Is that bad? Zethkar looked at her with something that might have been pity in his glowing blue eyes. Human. The Galactic Council has spent 10,000 years making sure that nothing ever leaves this world alive. They will not care that you came here by accident. Sarah felt ice forming in her stomach. What are you saying? I am saying that by helping me, you have probably signed your own death warrant. The Council cannot allow anyone to learn the truth about what happened here. What truth? Zethkar looked up at the approaching ships, now visible as bright dots against the orange sky. That the plague which drove my people mad was not natural. It was a weapon, created by the very beings who now call themselves our judges. Sarah stared at him. The Council created the plague? Not all of the Council, but those who lead it, yes. They feared our strength, so they poisoned our minds and then destroyed us when we became what they made us. Zethkar's voice grew harder, and now they come to finish what they started. The ships were getting closer. Sarah could see that they were warships, bristling with weapons. At their head flew a massive dreadnought bearing the golden eagle symbol of the Centaurian Empire. How long until they reach us? Zethkar asked. Sarah checked her instruments. Maybe an hour. Then we have little time. The warrior began walking toward the rebuilt city, moving more strongly now that his wounds had been treated. Come with me, human. There is something I must show you. My name is Sarah, she called after him. Sarah Chen. Zethkar paused and looked back at her. Sarah Chen, who helps her enemies and asks no reward. Follow me, Sarah Chen. It is time you learned why the galaxy fears this world. Sarah grabbed her equipment and hurried after the massive warrior. Behind them, the council ships grew larger against the sky, and the forbidden world prepared to reveal its secrets. The course of galactic history was about to turn on the kindness of one human who had simply wanted to help someone who was hurt. But first, Sarah had to survive long enough to understand what she had stumbled into. And high above them, Admiral Vorth of the Centaurian Empire looked down at the scanner readings from Ketha Prime and smiled coldly. After 10,000 years of waiting, he would finally have the chance to finish what his ancestors had started. Zethkar led Sarah through the rebuilt city at a pace that left her struggling to keep up. The massive warrior moved with purpose now, his forearms swinging in rhythm as he navigated the twisting streets between towering spires of dark metal. Where are we going? Sarah asked, breathing heavily. To the heart of Ketha Prime, Zethkar replied without slowing. To the place that holds the truth they tried to bury with my people. The city around them was alive with energy. Streams of blue light flowed along the walls of buildings like luminous blood vessels, and the air hummed with power. Sarah noticed that the architecture was both beautiful and practical. Every surface served multiple purposes, and there was no wasted space. Your people built all this? She asked. This was one of our smaller outposts, Zethkar said. A research facility, not a true city. But it will serve our purposes. They reached the base of the largest spire, a tower that stretched up into the clouds. Zethkar placed one of his hands on a panel beside what looked like an entrance, and the wall simply melted away, revealing a corridor beyond. Cathani biotechnology, he explained, seeing Sarah's surprised expression. Our buildings are grown, not built. They respond to us because they are part of us. They stepped inside, and immediately Sarah felt a strange sensation, as if the walls were watching her. The corridor was lit by the same blue energy that flowed through the city, and she could feel a subtle vibration in the floor beneath her feet. The building is alive, she said, more statement than question. In a sense, yes. All of our technology is bio-integrated. We learned long ago that the best tools are those that think and grow and adapt. Zethkar gestured for her to follow him toward what appeared to be a lift shaft. It is part of what made us so dangerous to those who prefer their subjects to remain static and controllable. The lift carried them up through the tower at incredible speed. Through transparent walls, Sarah could see the landscape of Ketha Prime, spread out below them. The vast glass plains, the distant mountains, and the approaching council fleet now clearly visible as a cluster of dark shapes against the orange sky. They'll be here soon, she said. Soon enough, Zethkar agreed. But first you must understand what you are truly dealing with. The lift stopped at the top of the tower, and they stepped out into a vast, circular chamber. The walls were covered with displays showing star maps, chemical formulas, and data streams that moved too fast for Sarah to follow. In the center of the room stood a pedestal holding what looked like a sphere of liquid light. The archive, Zethkar said reverently. The collected knowledge and memory of the Cathani race. Sarah approached the sphere cautiously. As she got closer, the displays on the walls began to change, showing images that made her gasp. She saw the Cathani as they had been before the plague, a proud, noble people who had achieved remarkable things. Cities that floated among the clouds, starships that could cross the galaxy in days rather than months, medical technology that could cure any disease and repair any injury. You were incredibly advanced, Sarah said. We were, Zethkar said sadly. Perhaps too advanced for our own good, or perhaps too advanced for others to tolerate. The displays changed again, showing a different story now. Sarah saw Cathani scientists working frantically in laboratories, their faces twisted with confusion and fear. She saw warriors attacking their own allies, their eyes filled with mindless rage. She saw cities burning as the plague spread through the population. It started small, Zethkar explained. A few individuals becoming violent for no reason, then more. Within a year, half our population was affected. Within 2 years, we were at war with ourselves and everyone else. But you said it wasn't natural. Zethkar touched the sphere, and the images changed once more. Now Sarah saw sleek ships bearing the symbols of various galactic council races. She watched as these ships released clouds of microscopic particles into Cathani atmospheres. We discovered the truth too late, Zethkar said. The plague was a bioweapon designed specifically to affect Cathani brain chemistry. It turned our greatest strength, our passion and dedication, into our greatest weakness. Sarah stared at the evidence flowing across the displays. Who? Which races were responsible? The Centaurians led the effort, but they had help from others who feared our growing influence. They called it a preemptive strike against future aggression, but we had never shown any sign of hostility toward them. Why would they do this? Zethkar gestured to another set of displays showing Cathani technology in action. Sarah watched ships moving faster than light without entering hyperspace, weapons that could reshape matter at the molecular level, and medical devices that could bring the dead back to life. Because we were becoming too powerful, Zethkar said simply. The Council maintains order through a careful balance of power. No single race is allowed to become too advanced, too influential, too independent. We were threatening that balance. So, they poisoned you and then painted you as the villains when you fought back. Yes. And when the war ended and the few survivors realized what had been done to them, the Council quarantined Ketha Prime to hide the evidence. For 10,000 years, this world has served as both prison and tomb. Sarah felt sick. She had grown up believing in the Galactic Council as a force for peace and order. To learn that they were capable of genocide was almost too much to process. But why are you telling me this? She asked. What can I do about something that happened 10,000 years ago? Zethkar turned away from the archive and looked out through the transparent walls at the approaching fleet. Because, Sarah Chen, you are about to be the first person to leave this world with knowledge of the truth, and because there is something else hidden on Ketha Prime that the Council still fears. He led her to another part of the chamber, where a new set of displays showed a massive structure deep beneath the planet's surface. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time, a fusion of technology and biology that pulsed with its own inner light. The Forge of Stars, Zethkar said. The greatest achievement of the Cathani race. What does it do? Everything. It can create matter from energy, heal any wound or disease, build ships that travel between galaxies as easily as you walk between rooms. With the Forge, a single world could reshape the entire galaxy. Sarah understood now. That's why they quarantined the planet. Not to keep you from getting out, but to keep anyone else from getting in. The Council has been waiting for the Forge to become accessible again. Our biotech requires living operators. It cannot be used by machines or the dead. They have been patient, knowing that eventually someone would come and awaken the systems. Someone like me. Yes. Your touch activated the dormant systems and woke me from stasis. Now the Forge is powering up for the first time in 10 millennia, and now the Council fleet has come to claim it. Sarah looked down at the approaching ships, with new understanding. They're not here to rescue me or punish me for trespassing. They're here for the Forge. Admiral Vorth commands that fleet, Zethkar said, reading from the displays. He is a direct descendant of the architect of our genocide. For his family, this represents the completion of a work begun centuries ago. What are you going to do? Zethkar was quiet for a long moment, his 4 hands clenched into fists. I am the last of my people, Sarah Chen. I could use the Forge to destroy the fleet, to make them pay for what they did to us. The technology exists to burn their ships from the sky and send their ashes to every corner of the galaxy. But that would make me the monster they always claimed I was. It would prove that they were right to fear us, right to destroy us. The great warrior looked at her with those glowing blue eyes. You showed me kindness without asking what I was or what I had done. You helped me because I was hurt, not because you hoped to gain something from it. Perhaps there is another way. The displays around them suddenly flashed red, and alarms began sounding throughout the tower. On the screens showing the approaching fleet, Sarah could see that the ships had begun deploying for battle formation. They're preparing to attack, she said. Zethkar moved to a control panel and began touching surfaces that responded to his contact. The planetary defense grid is coming online. They will not find Ketha Prime as helpless as they expect. You're going to fight them? I am going to give you a choice, Zethkar said. The Forge requires both Cathani biotechnology and outside perspective to function properly. My people designed it that way as a safeguard against misuse. I can operate the systems, but I need someone else to help guide them. Sarah felt the weight of history settling on her shoulders. What exactly are you asking me to do? Help me save both our peoples. The Forge can cure the plague that was used against the Cathani, not just here but throughout the galaxy. There are dozens of quarantined worlds where populations still suffer from variations of the same bioweapon. We could heal them all. And what about the Council fleet? Zethkar smiled, and for the first time it looked genuinely peaceful rather than predatory. We give them something they never expected from the last Cathani warrior, which is forgiveness and a chance to do better than their ancestors. Sarah looked out at the approaching ships, then back at the alien warrior who had somehow become her ally. The decision should have been difficult, but it was not. The Council had lied about the Cathani for 10,000 years. Now it was time for the truth to come out. What do we need to do? Zethkar moved back to the archive and placed all 4 of his hands on the sphere of light. We need to go deeper into the planet, to the Forge itself. And we need to be prepared for the possibility that Admiral Vorth would rather see Ketha Prime destroyed than allow the truth to spread. The tower shook as the first Council ships entered the atmosphere. Outside, the sky filled with the streaks of incoming missiles and energy beams. But the planetary defenses that had slept for 10 millennia were waking up, and they had been built by a race that understood war better than any other. Sarah followed Zethkar toward a new transport that would carry them down into the depths of the planet. Behind them, the battle for Ketha Prime had begun. Ahead of them lay the power to reshape the galaxy. The course of history would be decided, in the deep places of the forbidden world, by a human who had learned to look beyond old fears, and a Cathani who had chosen hope over revenge. The transport plunged through the depths of Ketha Prime like a falling star. Sarah gripped her seat as the organic vessel twisted and turned through tunnels that seemed to bend reality itself. Beside her, Zethkar's 4 hands moved across biocontrols that pulsed with life. Above them, the battle for the planet's surface had begun in earnest. Even this far underground, Sarah could feel the tremors of massive explosions as Council ships hammered the awakened defense grid. How long can the defenses hold? She asked. Long enough, Zethkar replied, though his voice carried doubt. The planetary systems were designed to protect against invasion, not to fight a prolonged battle with limited power reserves. The transport burst from the tunnel system into a vast underground cavern that took Sarah's breath away. The Forge of stars filled the space like a mechanical sunrise, its biometal surfaces pulsing with colors that had no names. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time, clearly alien yet somehow familiar in the way that all great works of engineering felt familiar to those who understood them. It's incredible, Sarah whispered. It is the work of 1,000 generations, Zethkar said with quiet pride. My people spent millennia learning to work with the fundamental forces of creation itself. They landed on a platform that extended from the Forge like a living dock. As soon as Zethkar stepped onto the structure, the entire facility began to change. Walls flowed like water, reshaping themselves into new configurations. Streams of energy flowed along pathways that seemed to grow even as Sarah watched. The Forge recognizes you, she said. It recognizes the last son of its creators, Zethkar corrected. But recognition is not enough. The safety protocols require 2 minds. to operate the core systems, one Cathani to provide biological integration, and one outsider to provide perspective and prevent misuse. They walked deeper into the forge, past chambers filled with swirling energy and corridors lined with what looked like living crystal. Everything pulsed with the same rhythm, as if the entire structure was breathing. "Your people built this as a safeguard?" Sarah asked. "We learned from our mistakes. Early in our history, we created weapons that were too powerful, tools that were too dangerous. The forge was designed to require cooperation, to prevent any one individual from reshaping the galaxy according to their will alone." They reached the central chamber, a spherical room at the heart of the forge. The walls were transparent, revealing the vast machinery that surrounded them on all sides. In the center of the room stood two platforms, one clearly designed for a Cathani, the other adjustable to accommodate different species. As they approached the platforms, displays throughout the chamber came to life. Sarah could see the battle raging above them in real time. The Council fleet had taken heavy losses, but Admiral Vorth was pressing the attack with grim determination. Several defense platforms had already been destroyed, and more fell with each passing minute. "He's not holding back," Sarah observed. "Vorth knows what is at stake," Zethkar said. "If the truth about the Cathani genocide becomes public, it will destroy the political structure that has kept his family in power for generations." On the displays, Sarah could see the Admiral's flagship, a massive dreadnought that bristled with enough firepower to level continents. As she watched, the ship began charging its main weapon, a planet cracker designed to shatter worlds. "He's going to destroy the entire planet," she said in horror. "He would rather see Catha Prime dead than risk losing control of the forge," Zethkar agreed. "We have perhaps an hour before he is ready to fire." Sarah moved to the second platform, feeling the biometal adjust beneath her feet to accommodate her smaller human form. "Then we better get started. What do I need to do?" Zethkar took his position on the Cathani platform, and immediately, his four hands sank into control surfaces that molded themselves to his touch. "Place your hands on the interface panels. The forge will establish a connection between us, but the experience may be intense." Sarah pressed her palms against the smooth surfaces that appeared beside her. The moment she made contact, the world exploded into sensation. She was still herself, but she was also connected to something vast and ancient. She could feel Zethkar's mind touching hers, and through him, she could sense the entire forge awakening. Power flowed through conduits, the size of buildings. Processors more complex than entire worlds began to calculate possibilities. But most overwhelming of all was the sudden awareness of what the forge could do. She could feel the potential for creation and destruction flowing around her like a river of liquid possibility. With a thought, she could reshape matter at the atomic level. With another, she could send healing energy to every living thing on the planet. "Focus, Sarah Chen," Zethkar's voice said inside her mind. "The power is intoxicating, but we must use it wisely." Sarah forced herself to concentrate on their goal. Through the forge's sensors, she could feel the plague that had tormented the Isu. Cathani, a subtle but vicious bioweapon that turned passion into rage and dedication into destruction. She could also sense similar weapons throughout the galaxy, still active on dozens of quarantined worlds. "I can see it," she said. "The plague pattern. It's like a virus, but designed specifically for neural chemistry. Can you trace it to its source?" Sarah let her awareness flow through the forge's vast memory banks. She saw the history of the galaxy laid out like a map, tracing the spread of various bioweapons across centuries. All of them led back to the same source: laboratories on Centauri Prime, the heart of Admiral Vorth's empire. "They've done this before," she said in shock. "Not just to the Cathani. Dozens of species have been targeted with similar weapons whenever they became too independent. The Council maintains order through controlled chaos," Zethkar said grimly. "They create crises and then offer solutions that benefit their members." Above them, the battle continued to rage. Sarah could see through the forge's sensors that several more defense platforms had fallen. The Admiral's planet cracker was nearly ready to fire. We're running out of time, she said. Then we must choose. Do we use the forge to destroy the fleet and preserve the secret? Or do we take a greater risk? Sarah understood what he was asking. They could use the forge's power to obliterate Admiral Vorth's ships, but that would only confirm the Council's fears about Cathani technology. It would ensure that Keitha Prime remained quarantined forever, and the truth about the genocide would stay buried. What's the greater risk? She asked. We broadcast the cure for the plague to every quarantined world in the galaxy simultaneously. We heal all the victims of the Council's bioweapons at once, and we send the evidence of what was done to them to every major population center. Sarah felt the scope of what he was suggesting. It would be impossible to hide or deny. The entire galaxy would learn the truth about the Council's methods in a single moment. But that will start a war, she said. Yes. But it will be a war for the truth, not a war built on lies. The Admiral's planet cracker reached full charge. On the displays, Sarah could see the massive weapon beginning to target the forge's location. They had minutes at most. There's a third option, Sarah said suddenly. What? We don't just heal the plague victims and expose the truth. We give everyone in the galaxy the ability to detect and resist bioweapons. We make it impossible for the Council to use these methods ever again. Zethkar was quiet for a moment, considering. That would require fundamental changes to the biology of billions of beings. It would be the largest act of genetic engineering in galactic history, and it would ensure that no one could ever do to another species what was done to yours. The risks are enormous. We could make a mistake that affects every living thing in the galaxy. Sarah felt the weight of the decision. Through the forge, she could sense the Admiral's finger hovering over the firing control for his planet cracker. In moments, Keitha Prime would be nothing but debris and radiation. But she could also sense something else, the hope and determination of her own species, scattered across dozens of human colonies. Humanity was young in galactic terms, but they shared something important with the Cathani. They refused to accept that things had to stay the way they were. I trust you, she said to Zethkar, and I think you trust me. Let's do something that's never been done before. Zethkar's mind touched hers with something that felt like a smile. Very well, Sarah Chen. Let us change the galaxy forever. Together they reached out through the forge to every living world in known space. Sarah felt her consciousness expand beyond anything she had thought possible, touching the minds and bodies of countless beings. She felt their pain, their fear, their hope. And then, in a moment that lasted forever and was over in an instant, she and Zethkar rewrote the biological destiny of every species in the galaxy. The plague patterns dissolved like smoke in sunlight. On quarantined worlds throughout space, populations that had suffered for millennia suddenly found their minds clear for the first time in generations. But more than that, every living being now carried within their genetic code the ability to recognize and resist bioweapons. The age of biological warfare was over. At the same time, the evidence of the Council's crimes flooded every communication network in the galaxy. Historical records, scientific data, and personal testimonies from the Forge's archives spread like wildfire across space. Within hours, every being with access to galactic communications would know the truth about the Cathani and dozens of other species. Above them, Admiral Vorth's planet cracker fired, but not at Keitha Prime. As the truth about his family's crimes spread across the galaxy, his own crew turned against him. The massive weapon was turned instead on the Admiral's flagship, vaporizing it and him in a single brilliant flash. Sarah and Zethkar collapsed on their platforms as the connection to the forge broke. Both were exhausted beyond measure, but alive. Is it done? Sarah asked weakly. Zethkar managed to nod. It is done. The galaxy will never be the same. On the displays around them, Sarah could see the Council fleet in chaos. Some ships were fleeing, others were firing on each other as the truth about their mission became clear. And from every corner of the galaxy, new voices were joining a growing chorus of anger and hope. The forbidden world had given up its secrets at last. The course of history had been changed forever by a human who had refused to abandon someone in need, and a Cathani who had chosen healing over revenge. But the hardest part was still to come. Now they had to survive long enough to see what kind of galaxy they had helped to create. 3 months after the day that would come to be known as the Great Awakening, Sarah Chen stood at the observation deck of the rebuilt Galactic Assembly Hall and watched ships from 100 different worlds converge on the neutral station. Many of these vessels bore the marks of recent battle, but they came in peace now, united by a common purpose. Beside her, Zethkar watched the same scene with his glowing blue eyes. The last Cathani warrior had traded his armor for the simple robes of an ambassador, though he still towered over every other being in the station. "Are you ready for this?" Sarah asked. "I have been alone for 10,000 years," Zethkar replied. "I think I am ready to speak for my people one final time." The galaxy had changed dramatically since the Forge of Stars had broadcast its revelations. The old Galactic Council had collapsed within days as member worlds learned the truth about the bioweapons program. Entire star systems had declared independence from the Centaurian Empire. 3 different wars of liberation were still being fought in the Outer Rim territories, but something new was being born from the chaos. The beings gathering in the assembly hall represented a different kind of galactic government, one built on truth rather than controlled deception, on cooperation rather than domination. "The human delegation has arrived," announced the station's AI. Through the transparent walls of the observation deck, Sarah could see the familiar shapes of human ships taking their positions in the traffic pattern. She smiled as she recognized the lead vessel. The exploration ship Pioneer had been her home for 2 years before she had transferred to the Wanderer. Captain Martinez was probably at the controls, still complaining about regulations while secretly enjoying every moment of the chaos. "Your year. People have adapted quickly to the new situation," Zethkar observed. "Humans are good at adapting," Sarah said. "It's one of our better qualities." That was an understatement. In the 3 months since the Great Awakening, human colonies throughout the galaxy had become centers of innovation and cooperation. The bioweapon resistance that Sarah and Zethkar had written into every living genome had freed dozens of species from generations of artificial limitations, and many of them were discovering abilities they had never known they possessed. The Altarians, freed from a plague that had made them docile and compliant, had revealed themselves to be master engineers, whose ships could travel faster than anything the old council had built. The crystalline vegan collectives, no longer suppressed by neural dampening compounds, had developed communication technologies that allowed instantaneous coordination across galactic distances, and humanity, young and adaptable as always, had become the natural mediators between species learning to work together for the first time in millennia. "Ambassador Chen, Ambassador Zethkar," said a voice behind them. They turned to see Director Yala of the Andromedan delegation, her blue-scaled features showing the strain of organizing the new assembly. "The session is ready to begin, Sarah," and Zethkar followed the director through corridors that buzzed with activity. Beings from across the galaxy moved with purpose, many of them species that had been quarantined or suppressed under the old order. The air itself seemed to vibrate with possibility. They entered the main assembly chamber, a vast spherical space where representatives from nearly 200 worlds waited in floating platforms arranged in no particular hierarchy. This was not the old council where certain species sat in positions of authority, while others were relegated to observer status. Every world that chose to participate had an equal voice. Sarah took her position at the human delegation's platform, while Zethkar moved to the center of the chamber. As the last survivor of the Cathani, he had been given the honor of opening the first session of the new Galactic Assembly. The chamber fell silent as Zethkar began to speak. His voice, amplified by the station's systems, reached every corner of the vast space. 10,000 years ago, he said, my people were murdered by those who feared what we might become. Today I stand before you not seeking revenge, but offering something my ancestors never had. The chance to build a galaxy where no species needs to fear another's success. Murmurs of approval rippled through the chamber. On her platform, Sarah felt a surge of pride. The warrior who had once been ready to die alone on a dead world had become a voice for hope and cooperation. The Forge of Stars that my people built was designed as a safeguard against the misuse of power, Zethkar continued. It required cooperation between different minds to function. I believe that principle should guide us now. No single species, no matter how advanced, should have the power to determine the fate of others. Pretty words, interrupted a harsh voice from across the chamber. Sarah looked over to see Commander Thrix of the Centaurian Remnant, one of the few surviving ships from Admiral Vorth's fleet. But what guarantees do we have that you will not use your forge to impose your will on the rest of us? Zethkar turned to face the Centaurian commander calmly. The same guarantee that has always existed, Commander Thrix. The forge requires 2 minds to operate, one Kethany and one from another species. I am the last of my people. When I die, the forge dies, with me unless it is shared. And you would share such power? I already have, Zethkar said simply. He gestured toward Sarah's platform. Ambassador Chen and I rewrote the genetic code of every living being in this galaxy. If I had wanted to impose my will, I could have done so 3 months ago. Sarah stood and activated her platform's communication system. The human delegation proposes that the Forge of Stars be placed under joint control of the new Galactic Assembly, she said. Any use of its power would require approval from a majority of member worlds. The proposal sent waves of discussion through the chamber. Sarah could see representatives huddling in urgent conferences, translating the implications for their home worlds. You would give up such an advantage? Asked Ambassador Keller of the Vegan Collective, her crystalline form shimmering with surprise. It was never meant to be an advantage, Sarah replied. The Kethani built the forge as a tool for all life, not a weapon for one species. It belongs to the galaxy, not to any individual world. The human speaks wisdom, said a new voice. All heads turned to see a massive shape materializing in the center of the chamber, a titan from the deep space habitat worlds, one of the oldest species in the galaxy. We have watched the young races with interest. Some seek to dominate, others to isolate themselves. But these humans, they seek to elevate all. Sarah felt a flush of warmth at the ancient being's words, but she also felt the weight of responsibility. Humanity was being cast as the mediator of the new order, and she knew that not all of her species would welcome that role. The human colonies have agreed to serve as neutral ground for species learning to work together, she said. But we cannot do this alone. Every world represented here has knowledge and abilities that the galaxy needs. And what of enforcement? Asked Commander Thrix. How will you prevent species from falling back into the old patterns of domination and conquest? Zethkar answered that question. The bioweapon resistance that now exists in every living being extends beyond simple immunity to artificial plagues. It includes enhanced empathy and communication abilities. It will be much harder for any species to dehumanize another when they can literally feel their pain. Sarah had discovered this herself in the weeks following the Great Awakening. She found herself more aware of the emotional states of those around her, more able to understand different perspectives. It was subtle, but real. The galaxy was becoming more connected at a fundamental level. We propose a new charter, said Director Yala, stepping forward with a holographic display. The principles of the new Galactic Assembly. First, no species shall be prevented from developing its full potential. Second, no world shall be quarantined or isolated without its consent. Third, all major decisions affecting multiple worlds shall be made by consensus rather than force. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Representatives argued details, proposed amendments, and negotiated compromises. But gradually, Sarah could see consensus forming. The beings in this chamber had all experienced oppression under the old order. They were determined not to repeat those mistakes. As the session wound down, Sarah found herself back on the observation deck with Zethkar. Outside, the ships of the new alliance maintained their careful formations, but she could see that many of them were beginning to work together. Human vessels shared navigational data with Altarian ships. Vegan collectives coordinated their movements with Andromedan cruisers. "Do you think it will work?" she asked. "I think it has to," Zethkar replied. "The alternative is a return to the old ways of fear and domination, and I believe your species will not allow that to happen." Sarah looked out at the stars, thinking about all the human colonies scattered throughout the galaxy. They were still young and sometimes reckless, but they had something that older species sometimes lost: the belief that things could always be better than they were. "Humanity didn't ask to be the mediators of galactic politics," she said. "No, but you stepped forward when it was needed. That is what makes you dangerous to those who prefer the status quo, and valuable to those who seek change." A communication alert chimed, and Sarah activated her personal display. The message was from Captain Martinez aboard the Pioneer. "Sarah," his familiar voice said, "we've got reports of a new species making contact in the Vega system. They've been in isolation for centuries, but they're asking specifically for human representatives. Think you and your tall friend might be up for another first contact mission?" Sarah looked at Zethkar, who had obviously heard the message. The great warrior's scarred features showed something that might have been amusement. "It seems the galaxy still needs pioneers," he said. "Are you up for more traveling?" Sarah asked. "I have spent 10,000 years on one world," Zethkar replied. "I think it is time I saw what else the universe has to offer." Sarah activated her communicator. "Martinez, tell the Vegans we'll be there in a week, and prepare the Pioneer for a long-range mission. We might be gone for a while." As they left the observation deck, Sarah reflected on how much her life had changed since that desperate landing on Ketha Prime. She had been a simple exploration pilot, charting new routes through empty space. Now she was an ambassador helping to shape the future of galactic civilization. But in a way, she was still doing the same job she had always done, exploring the unknown and bringing different worlds together. The only difference was the scale. Behind them, the new Galactic Assembly continued its work, building a framework for cooperation that might last for thousands of years. And ahead of them lay the Vega system, where another species was ready to join the growing community of free worlds. The human who had stepped on a forbidden world had indeed shifted the course of history forever. But the story was far from over. In fact, for humanity and the galaxy alike, it was just beginning. Years later, historians would mark the Great Awakening as the moment when the galaxy truly came alive. But for Sarah Chen and Zethkar, it would always be remembered as the day when a small act of kindness between strangers opened the door to infinite possibility. The course of the galaxy had been changed forever, and it would never stop changing as long as there were beings willing to reach across the darkness and offer help to those in need. The stars had never seemed so close. Captain Marcus Vale stood on the bridge of the ESS Discovery, watching the swirling colors of hyperspace fade away. Through the large windows, he could see something that no human had ever seen before: the capital world of the Galactic Federation. Nexus Prime hung in space like a jewel, its surface covered in cities that sparkled with lights from 100 different worlds. "Sir, we're getting a message," said Lieutenant Torres from her station. "They're giving us permission to dock." Marcus nodded slowly. After 300 years of looking up at the stars and wondering if anyone was out there, humanity finally had their answer. Not only were they not alone, but they were being invited to join something bigger than they had ever imagined. The year was 2387, and it had taken humanity this long to crack the secret of faster-than-light travel. While Earth's scientists had been working on warp drives and quantum engines, the rest of the galaxy had been talking to each other for thousands of years. "Take us in slowly," Marcus ordered. "And remember, we're representing all of humanity here." The Discovery moved toward the massive space station that orbited Nexus Prime. As they got closer, Marcus could see ships of every shape and size. Some looked like they were made of crystal. Others seemed to glow with their own light. A few appeared to be made of living metal that shifted and changed as he watched. "Captain, look at that one," Torres whispered. pointing to a ship that was at least 10 times the size of their own vessel. It was completely black, except for patterns of blue light that moved across its surface like flowing water. Marcus had read the files. That was probably a Kalari ship. The Kalari were one of the 3 most powerful races in the Federation. They thought as one mind, sharing thoughts across their entire species. The idea made Marcus uncomfortable, but he knew they had to be respectful. The docking process took 2 hours. When it was finally complete, Marcus straightened his uniform and walked to the airlock. Behind him came Dr. Lisa Park, humanity's best xenobiologist, and Commander Jake Stone, their military advisor. The airlock opened with a soft hiss. The first thing that hit Marcus was the smell, like flowers and ozone mixed together. The second thing was the sight of the 3 beings waiting for them. The tallest one looked like it was made of living crystal. Its body was clear like glass, but with veins of silver light running through it. This had to be one of the Vithani, the oldest race in the Federation. It moved with slow, careful steps, and when it spoke, its voice sounded like wind chimes. "Welcome, humans of Earth," it said. "I am Council Member Athan of the Vithani. We have been waiting to meet you." Next to Athan stood something that looked like a person-shaped cloud of golden light. The Luminari were beings of pure energy, and this one flickered and pulsed as it spoke. "I am Radiance of Stars," it said in a voice like music. "The Luminari greet you." The third being was the most surprising. It looked almost human, except for the blue-gray skin and the extra set of arms. Its face was kind, with large dark eyes that seemed to see everything. "And I am Ambassador Kale of the Helix Union," it said with a smile. "Don't worry, we know this is a lot to take in. Your first time meeting other species is always overwhelming." Marcus stepped forward and tried to keep his voice steady. "I'm Captain Marcus Vale of the Earth Space Service. This is Dr. Park and Commander Stone. We're honored to be here." Athan's crystal body made a soft humming sound. "Your species is young, but that is not unusual. Many races find us when they are ready to join the greater community." "How many races are there?" Dr. Park asked, her scientific curiosity overcoming her nervousness. "In the Federation?" "Over 200, Radiance of Stars replied. "Some are ancient, like the Vithani, who have been traveling the stars for 50,000 of your years. Others are newer, like the Helix Union, who joined us only 3,000 years ago." 3,000 years was considered new. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Ambassador Kale seemed to notice his discomfort. "Please don't be intimidated. Everyone starts somewhere. The important thing is that you're here now, and you want to learn." They were led through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. The walls were covered in symbols and writing from dozens of different languages. Other beings walked past them, some tall and thin, others short and round, a few that seemed to float rather than walk. "This is incredible," Dr. Park whispered. "The diversity of life forms." "Indeed," Athan agreed. "The Federation celebrates this diversity. We have learned that different species bring different strengths. The Vithani are good at long-term planning. The Luminari understand energy and physics better than anyone. The Kalari are excellent at organizing and managing complex systems." "What about humans?" Commander Stone asked. "What do we bring?" There was a pause. The 3 aliens exchanged glances, or what passed for glances among beings so different from each other. "That remains to be seen," Radiance of Stars said finally. "Your species is unique. We have studied your history, your culture, your technology. You are both creative and destructive, peaceful and violent. It is, puzzling." Marcus felt his heart sink. "We've had our problems, yes, but we're trying to be better." "Of course," Kale said quickly. "All species have difficult periods in their development. The important thing is that you've survived them and are here now." They entered a vast chamber with a domed ceiling that showed a map of the galaxy. Thousands of points of light marked the worlds of the Federation. Earth was a tiny, Dot near the edge, recently added to the display. This is where the council meets, Ethan explained. Representatives from all member species gather here to discuss issues that affect the galaxy. It's beautiful, Dr. Park said, staring up at the star map. It represents thousands of years of cooperation and peace, Radiance of Stars said with pride. Wars between species ended long ago. We have learned to settle our differences through discussion and compromise. Marcus felt a weight on his shoulders. Humanity had only recently ended its last major war. The scars were still fresh. The weapons still existed. How could they fit into a galaxy that had achieved such peace? There is something else, Ethan said, its voice becoming more serious. The reason your arrival is so timely. We have a problem. The star map changed, zooming in on a section of the galaxy's outer edge. Several points of light were flashing. Red, the Devourers, Kale said grimly. Machines left over from an ancient war. For centuries they've been dormant, but recently they've become active again. They're attacking colonies on the rim worlds. Attacking how? Commander Stone asked, his military training kicking in. They consume everything, Radiance of Stars explained. Ships, stations, even entire planets. They break matter down to its basic components and use it to build more of themselves. The Federation has been trying to stop them, Ethan continued. But our response has been slow. We are not used to dealing with threats that require immediate action. Marcus looked at his companions. Stone was already thinking tactically, he could tell. Park was fascinated by the idea of self-replicating machines, and Marcus himself was thinking about what this meant for humanity. You want our help? He said. We would welcome it, Kale admitted. Your species has experience with warfare that we lack, and your technology, while primitive in some ways, has certain advantages. What kind of advantages? Stone asked. You build things to be tough, Radiance of Stars said. Most Federation technology is elegant, efficient, but fragile. Your ships are built like weapons, even the civilian ones. Your tactics are aggressive. Marcus felt a mix of pride and shame. Humanity's violent history was both their weakness and their strength. We'll need to discuss this with Earth, he said finally. But I think I can speak for my species when I say we want to help. Ethan's crystal body flashed brighter. Good. The Devourers have been quiet for too long. Our scouts report they're massing near the Kepler Nebula. If they break through there, they could threaten the core worlds. As they left the council chamber, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this was a turning point. Humanity was about to prove itself to the galaxy. He just hoped they were ready for what that might mean. The stars had never seemed so close, but now Marcus wondered if that was a good thing or not. 3 months had passed since humanity joined the fight against the Devourers. Admiral Jack Kane stood on the bridge of the ESS Vengeance, watching the tactical display with growing frustration. The Federation fleet was moving too slowly again. Sir, the Vithani command ship is requesting another council meeting, reported his communications officer, Ensign Davis. They want to discuss strategy for another 4 hours. Kane rubbed his temples. 4 hours. By the time they finished talking, the Devourers would have consumed another colony. He had tried to explain this to the Federation commanders, but they didn't seem to understand the concept of urgency. Tell them we'll attend, but remind them that people are dying while we debate, Kane said. The human fleet had proven itself in the first few battles. While Federation ships were elegant and powerful, they were designed for exploration and peaceful missions. Human ships built during Earth's Age of Wars were made to fight and survive damage. More importantly, human tactics were unpredictable. Kane remembered the Battle of Proxima Station. The Federation fleet had been arranging itself in perfect formation, following battle plans that were centuries old. Meanwhile, the Devourers had adapted and were flanking them. Kane had broken formation, taking his small squadron of destroyers directly through the enemy line, firing at everything that moved. The Federation commanders had been horrified by his reckless tactics, but it had worked. The Devourers hadn't expected such aggressive behavior and had been caught off guard. Admiral, called Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mills from the sensor station. "We're getting a distress signal from the Vithani colony ship Crystal Song. They're under attack near the Omega system." Kane's blood went cold. The Crystal Song carried 40,000 Vithani civilians, families who were being evacuated from a border world. If the Devourers got them. "Where's the nearest Federation fleet?" he asked. 6 hours away at maximum speed," Mills replied. "And us?" 2 hours, sir." Kane didn't hesitate. "Set course for Omega system, maximum speed. Send a message to the Federation fleet. Tell them we're responding to the distress call." "Sir, shouldn't we wait for backup?" asked Commander Stone, who had been assigned to Kane's fleet after the first contact mission. "The Devourers have at least 20 ships in that area." 20 ships against 40,000 civilians, Kane said grimly. "I'll take those odds." The journey to Omega system felt like the longest 2 hours of Kane's life. When they finally dropped out of hyperspace, the scene was worse than he had imagined. The Crystal Song was surrounded by Devourer ships, dark, angular machines that were already extending tentacles toward the colony vessel. "They're trying to board," Mills reported. "The Crystal Song's shields are down to 30%. Kane studied the tactical display. His fleet had 12 ships against 20 Devourers. Normally that would be suicide. But Kane had something the Devourers didn't expect. Humanity's newest weapon. Dr. Elena Ross had called it the Rift Generator, a device that could create small tears in space-time. It was experimental, dangerous, and completely untested in actual combat. The scientists back on Earth weren't even sure it was safe to use, but 40,000 lives were hanging in the balance. "All ships, attack pattern Delta," Kane ordered. "Focus fire on the Devourers closest to the colony ship, and prepare the Rift Generator." "Sir, the weapon isn't ready for field testing," protested Chief Engineer Roberts over the comm. "The power requirements alone could overload our systems." "Then we better make sure it works the first time," Kane replied. The human fleet charged into battle with a ferocity that surprised even Kane. His crews fought like they were defending Earth itself. The Vengeance's railguns tore through Devourer hulls while the destroyer squadrons darted between the enemy ships firing at point-blank range. But it wasn't enough. For every Devourer they destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. And the Crystal Song's shields were failing. "Admiral, the colony ship won't last another 10 minutes, Mills called out. Kane made his decision. "Activate the Rift Generator. Target the center of the Devourer formation." "Sir, the colony ship is too close," Roberts warned. "The spatial distortion could affect them too." "It's their only chance," Kane said. "Do it." The Rift Generator powered up with a sound like reality tearing apart. Space itself seemed to bend around the Vengeance as energy built up in the weapon's core. Kane could feel the ship shaking as the generator drew power from every system. "Firing!" Roberts shouted. What happened next would be talked about for generations, though most of those who witnessed it would try to forget. A ball of twisted space-time erupted from the Vengeance and expanded rapidly. Where it touched the Devourer ships, they simply stopped existing, not destroyed, but erased from reality itself. The effect spread outward like a wave, consuming the entire enemy formation in seconds. But the wave didn't stop there. The edge of the spatial distortion clipped the Crystal Song's quantum matrix, the delicate system that allowed Vithani consciousness to exist in their crystal bodies. Kane watched in horror as the colony ship's lights began to flicker and dim. "Oh no," he whispered. The Crystal Song sent one final message before going dark. "What have you done to us?" Kane's victory had become a disaster. The Rift Generator had worked perfectly, too perfectly. The spatial distortion had not only destroyed the Devourer fleet, but had also damaged the very thing that kept the Vithani alive. "Get us to that colony ship now," Kane ordered. But it was too late. When the human rescue teams boarded the Crystal Song, they found 40,000 crystal bodies that no longer glowed with life. The Vithani consciousness, which existed as patterns of light and energy within their crystalline forms, had been disrupted by the space-time distortion. They were all dead. Kane stood in the Crystal Song's main corridor, surrounded by the dim crystal forms of what had once been living beings. Children, adults, elders, all victims of his decision to use an untested weapon. "Sir," Commander Stone said quietly, "you saved them from the Devourers." "No," Kane replied, his voice hollow. "I killed them myself." The news spread through the Federation faster than hyperspace travel. The humans had used some kind of superweapon that could erase matter from existence. Worse, they had used it so close to a civilian vessel that it had killed everyone aboard. When Kane tried to explain what had happened to the Federation Council, they listened with growing horror and suspicion. "You deployed an experimental weapon, without authorization," Council member Ethan said, its crystal body dimming with what Kane was learning to recognize as anger. "A weapon that manipulates space-time itself." "We were trying to save lives," Kane protested. "The Devourers would have killed everyone anyway, would they?" asked Radiance of Stars, its golden light flickering. "Or would they have simply consumed the ship? The Vithani consciousness might have survived in backup crystals. Now we will never know." Ambassador Kale looked tired and older than when Kane first met him. "Admiral, we understand that you meant well, but this incident raises serious questions about human weapons and tactics." "What kind of questions?" Kane asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Your species has been at war for most of your recorded history," Ethan said. "You have weapons that can destroy planets, biological agents that can kill entire populations, and now devices that can tear apart reality itself. The Council is concerned." Kane felt a chill run down his spine. "Are you saying we're not welcome in the Federation?" "We're saying that we need to understand what we're dealing with," Radiance of Stars replied. "Your military technology is far more advanced than we realized, and your willingness to use it is troubling." In the weeks that followed, Kane noticed changes in how the Federation treated human forces. Their ships were no longer invited to joint planning sessions. Human officers were excluded from sensitive briefings, and there were always Federation observers aboard human vessels now. The other species whispered when humans walked by. Kane heard fragments of conversations, words like dangerous and unpredictable and weapons of mass destruction. Back on Earth, Dr. Ross was proud of the Rift generator's success in combat. "It worked perfectly, Admiral. We can refine the SCI-FI design, make it more precise." Kane looked at the data from the Crystal Song incident. 40,000 deaths from a weapon meant to save lives. "No," he said finally. "Seal the research. I never want to see that weapon used again." But it was too late. The Federation had already seen what humans were capable of, and in the deepest levels of the Council chambers, 3 species were meeting in secret. The Vithani, still mourning their dead. The Kalari, calculating the threat humanity posed to galactic stability. The Luminari, analyzing human weapons technology, with growing alarm. "They're too dangerous," one of them said. "Their potential for destruction is unlimited," said another. "Something must be done," concluded the third. Admiral Kane never learned about that secret meeting. He was too busy trying to figure out why Federation ships were starting to follow human vessels, always staying just out of sensor range, always watching. The war against the Devourers continued, but now there was a new tension in the galaxy. And at the center of it all was humanity, the species that had come to help, but had instead become something the galaxy feared. The tragedy of the Crystal Song had changed everything. What start? Captain Marcus Vale received the invitation on a Tuesday morning. The message was formal and elegant, written in the flowery language the Federation Council preferred. They wanted to honor humanity's service in the war against the Devourers with a special ceremony at the Kepler Nebula, a fleet review, Vale read aloud to his staff, to celebrate the brave humans who have fought alongside our Federation forces. Commander Stone looked up from his datapad. "Sounds nice, sir. When was the last time anyone threw us a party?" Vale smiled, but something felt wrong. In the 6 months since the Crystal Song incident, relations with the Federation had grown cold. Human ships were watched constantly. Human officers were excluded from important meetings. And now, suddenly, they wanted to throw a celebration? "Sir," Lieutenant Torres said from her station, "Earth Command is ordering all available ships to attend." They're calling it a mandatory show of unity. Vale's unease grew stronger. All available ships? That would leave Earth's defenses very thin. How many ships are we talking about? He asked. Torres checked her screen. 500 vessels, sir. Every major warship in the human fleet. 500 ships, nearly the entire Earth Space Navy, all gathering in one place, far from home. What about the Devourer threat? Stone asked. Are we just abandoning the front lines? According to this, Torres said, reading from her screen, the Federation believes the Devourer menace has been contained. They want to honor our contribution before reassigning us to peaceful exploration duties. Vale felt his stomach drop. Peaceful exploration. That was Federation speak for, we don't want you fighting anymore. 3 days later, the human fleet arrived at the Kepler Nebula. It was a beautiful sight. Clouds of gas and dust painted in colors of red, blue, and gold, lit by the stars within. Perfect for a ceremony, Vale thought. Also perfect for an ambush. The human ships arranged themselves in formation as requested. Admiral Kane's flagship, the Vengeance, took the center position. Around it spread destroyers, cruisers, and support vessels, the pride of humanity's space navy. Sir, Torres called out, I'm reading a lot of ships on the other side of the nebula. Federation vessels. How many? Vale asked. I'm not sure, sir. The nebula is interfering with our sensors, but it looks like thousands. Vale's blood went cold. Thousands? Before Torres could answer, space around them began to shimmer. Ships appeared out of nowhere. Vithani crystal vessels, Kalari hive ships, and Luminari energy cruisers. They were using some kind of cloaking, technology humanity had never seen before. Within minutes, the human fleet was completely surrounded. This is Admiral Kane to all Federation vessels, came Kane's voice over the comm. Please explain your positions. Are we under attack? The response came from Council Member Ethan aboard the massive Vithani flagship Eternal Light. Its voice, transmitted across all frequencies, was cold as ice. Admiral Kane, Captain Vale, officers of the human fleet, you are not under attack. You are under arrest. Vale's bridge fell silent. In the distance, he could see the shapes of Federation ships, more than he had ever seen in one place. There had to be 10,000 of them, maybe more. Arrest? Kane's voice crackled with confusion and anger. On what charges? The charges are simple, came another voice, radiance of stars speaking for the Luminari. Possession of weapons of mass destruction, threat to galactic peace, and the murder of 40,000 Vithani civilians. That was an accident, Kane protested. We were trying to save them. Were you? This voice belonged to Prime Mind 7, the Kalari representative. Or were you testing your new weapon on a civilian target? Our analysis suggests the latter. Vale couldn't believe what he was hearing. They thought the Crystal Song incident was intentional, that humans had deliberately murdered civilians. You will surrender your vessels immediately, Ethan continued. Your crews will be transported to a secure facility where you will be re-educated. Your weapons will be destroyed and your species will be relocated to a world where you can do no harm. Relocated? Vale found his voice. You mean imprisoned. We prefer the term protected supervision, Prime Mind 7 replied. The galaxy has seen what humans are capable of. Your history of violence, your weapons of mass destruction, your willingness to use them on innocents. You cannot be allowed to threaten the peace we have built. Vale looked at his tactical display. The Federation had positioned their ships perfectly. The humans were trapped in the center of the nebula with no way out. 10,000 ships against 500. It should have been hopeless. But Vale knew something the Federation didn't understand about humans. When trapped, when faced with impossible odds, when given the choice between slavery and death, humans would always choose to fight. Admiral Kane, Vale said into his comm, what are your orders? There was a long pause. Then Kane's voice came back, steady and determined. All ships, this is Admiral Kane. We did not come to this galaxy to be slaves. We came as friends, as allies, as protectors of the innocent. If the Federation wants to treat us as criminals, then they will learn what human criminals can do. Also, ship's attack pattern Alpha. Make them remember us. The Battle of Kepler Nebula began with the humans doing something no Federation tactician had ever seen before. Instead of trying to break out of the trap, they attacked inward, ramming themselves deeper into the enemy formation. Vale watched as the destroyer ESS Lightning crashed directly into a Kalari hive ship, its captain choosing to sacrifice his vessel rather than surrender. The explosion took out 3 more Federation ships. "Sir," Torres called out. "The Admiral is ordering all ships with critical damage to ram the nearest enemy vessel." Vale understood. They couldn't win this battle, but they could make it cost the Federation dearly. Human ships, already damaged by enemy fire, turned themselves into guided missiles, crashing into Federation vessels at full speed. The ESS Discovery rammed a Vithani crystal ship, its hull breaking apart as it smashed through the alien vessel's elegant structure. The ESS Courage took out 2 Luminary energy cruisers before being destroyed. The ESS Freedom, its engines failing, crashed into a Federation command ship and detonated its entire weapons magazine. But the Federation had numbers. For every human ship that fought and died, 20 Federation vessels remained. The battle was hopeless from the start. Vale's own ship, the ESS Unity, was taking heavy damage. His shields were down, his weapons were failing, and half his crew was dead or injured, sir, Torres said, blood running down her face from a head wound. "Our engines are critical. We won't last much longer." Vale looked at the tactical display. Only a dozen human ships were still fighting. The rest were debris floating in the nebula, their crews dead or captured. "Torres," he said quietly, "can you get a message to Earth?" "I can try, sir." Vale thought about what to say. How do you tell an entire planet that its fleet has been destroyed? How do you warn them that the galaxy they wanted to join was now their enemy? "Send this," he said. "Earth Command, this is Captain Vale. The Federation has betrayed us. They have destroyed our fleet and plan to invade Earth. Prepare for war. Tell our people that we died fighting for freedom, not for conquest. Tell them to remember us and tell them to make the galaxy remember us too." The message was sent just as a Vithani energy beam tore through the Unity's hull. Vale felt the ship breaking apart around him, felt the air rushing out through the breach. His last thought was of Earth, of his wife and daughter, and of what was coming. Only 12 human ships escaped the trap at Kepler Nebula, 12 ships out of 500. But those 12 carried a message that would change everything. The Federation thought they had won a great victory. They had eliminated the human threat before it could grow larger. They had prevented another species from bringing violence to their peaceful galaxy. What they didn't understand was that they had just declared war on the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever known. A species that, when pushed to the edge, would push back with everything they had. The survivors who made it back to Earth told their story. They spoke of betrayal, of friends dying in the cold of space, of a galaxy that smiled while preparing a knife for humanity's back. Earth's response was swift and terrible. If the Federation wanted to see what humans were really capable of, they would get their wish. The war that followed would make the Battle of Kepler Nebula look like a small disagreement between neighbors. The Federation had started something they didn't understand. And before it was over, the galaxy itself would weep for what they had unleashed. The age of peace was ending. The age of war had begun, and at the center of it all was humanity. No longer the hopeful species that had dreamed of joining the stars, but something darker, angrier, and far more dangerous. The galaxy had made its choice at Kepler Nebula. Now it would live with the consequences. Dr. Elena Ross had not slept in 3 days. Her eyes were red with exhaustion, her hands shaking from too much coffee, but she couldn't stop working. Outside her laboratory on Luna Base, she could see the construction yards where humanity was building ships unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. "Doctor," her assistant Tom called out, "the prototype is ready for testing." Elena looked at the device on the table before her. It was small, no bigger than a briefcase, but it contained enough destructive power to cripple an entire star system. She had called it the silence weapon, though the official military designation was much longer and more boring. "Are you sure about the range calculations?" she asked. "Triple-checked, ma'am. One device can disrupt quantum entanglement networks across a 50 light-year radius. The Federation won't be able to communicate or coordinate their fleets." Elena nodded grimly. Communication was everything in space warfare. Cut that, and even the largest fleet became a collection of isolated ships, easy to pick off one by one. It had been 18 months since Kepler Nebula, 18 months since the Federation had shown their true face. In that time, humanity had transformed from a peaceful species seeking friendship into something the galaxy had never seen before, a civilization completely dedicated to war. Every human colony was now a fortress. Every civilian ship had been converted or scrapped for military use. Children as young as 12 were being trained in combat tactics. The entire species had one goal: survival through victory. "Dr. Ross, to the bridge," came the announcement over the base's speakers. Priority 1. Elena made her way to the command center where Admiral Lisa Park, the former xenobiologist who had become one of Earth's top military commanders, was studying holographic displays of Federation fleet movements. "Elena, thank you." "God, you're here," Park said. "We just lost contact with the Beijing and the Mumbai. The Federation found our secret base in the Centauri system." Elena felt a chill. Those weren't just ships. They were mobile research facilities, each carrying hundreds of scientists and their families. "Survivors?" "None," Park said quietly. "The Federation isn't taking prisoners anymore. They learned that lesson at Kepler. The war had been brutal from the beginning, but it had grown worse as both sides realized what was at stake. The Federation fought to preserve their peaceful galaxy. Humanity fought for the right to exist." "Show me the tactical situation," Elena said. The holographic display showed the galaxy divided into zones of control. Blue areas belonged to the Federation, still the vast majority of inhabited space. Red areas were human-controlled, a scattered collection of systems connected by hidden supply routes, and between them lay the gray zones, systems too damaged by fighting to support life. "We're losing," Park admitted. "They have the numbers, the resources, the industrial capacity. For every ship we build, they build 10. But we have advantages. They don't," Elena replied, thinking of the weapon designs hidden in her encrypted files. "We fight differently." That was the understatement of the century. Human tactics had evolved far beyond anything the Federation could understand. While they still fought like civilized beings, following rules of engagement that had governed galactic warfare for millennia, humans fought like the survival of their species depended on it. Because it did. Human ships used biological weapons that adapted to multiple alien physiologies. They deployed quantum viruses that could corrupt AI systems from across a star system. They had turned asteroids into guided missiles and space stations into bombs. And now, Elena had created something that would change the war completely. "When do we deploy the silence weapon?" she asked. "Tomorrow," Park replied. "The Federation is massing their fleets for a final push on Earth. They want to end this war quickly, before we can develop anything worse." Elena almost laughed. Worse? They had no idea. The next day, a single human stealth ship slipped through Federation lines and reached the center of their communication network, a massive space station called the Great Voice that coordinated all Federation military activities. The ship never fired a shot. It simply activated the silence weapon and vanished back into hyperspace. Within hours, the effect became clear. Federation fleets across the galaxy found themselves cut off from each other. Commanders who had relied on instant communication for thousands of years were suddenly operating blind. Admiral Kane, now commanding the human resistance from a hidden base in the Outer Rim, launched his counterattack immediately. Human fleets struck at isolated Federation groups using hit-and-run tactics that had been impossible when the enemy could coordinate their response. "It's working," Kane reported to Earth Command. "We've destroyed 3 Federation supply convoys and 2 major battle groups. They can't coordinate their defenses." But the Federation's response was swift and terrible. Council member Athan stood before the emergency session of the Federation Council, its crystal body dim with rage. The humans have crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed. They have attacked the very foundation of our civilization, our ability to communicate across the stars. The situation is worse than you know, added Prime Mind 7. Our analysis shows that the quantum disruption is spreading. Systems that were not directly affected are now losing communication as well. The humans have created a weapon that attacks the structure of space-time itself. Radiance of stars flickered with dangerous energy. Then we must respond in kind. No more limited warfare. No more mercy. The humans want to destroy our civilization? Then we will destroy theirs completely. The Federation's retaliation came 3 weeks later. Elena was in her lab when the alarm started screaming. She ran to the observation deck and looked out at Earth, that beautiful blue marble that had been humanity's home for millions of years. The sun was getting brighter. No, she whispered, understanding immediately what she was seeing. The Federation had done something to Sool, Earth's sun. They had destabilized its nuclear fusion process, turning it into a weapon against the planet it had warmed for billions of years. All stations, this is Earth Command, came the emergency broadcast. Solar instability detected. Massive solar flare incoming. All orbital facilities begin immediate evacuation procedures. But it was worse than a solar flare. Elena watched in horror as the sun began to expand, its outer layers becoming unstable. The Federation had turned Earth's own star into a supernova. How long do we have? She asked the computer. Based on current expansion rate, solar explosion will occur in 6 hours, 14 minutes. 6 hours to evacuate a planet of 8 billion people. Elena ran back to her lab, her mind racing. The evacuation ships couldn't carry everyone. Millions would die when the sun exploded. But maybe, just maybe, she could give them something to remember humanity by. She activated her personal computer and began uploading every weapons design, every tactical manual, every piece of military technology that humanity had developed during the war. But she didn't send it to the evacuation fleets. She sent it to the human resistance bases scattered across the galaxy, along with a simple message: make them pay. The destruction of Earth was visible from 1,000 light-years away. The supernova that had once been Sool tore through space, creating a gravitational anomaly that pulled in nearby star systems. The Centauri system was consumed first, then Wolf 359, then Barnard's star. By the time the expanding destruction field finally stabilized, it had consumed 12 star systems and killed over 50 billion beings, human and alien alike. The Federation Council met in emergency session, staring at the readings from their long-range sensors. "What have we done?" whispered Ambassador Kale, his blue-gray skin pale with shock. "We have ended the human threat," Ethan replied, but its crystal body was dim with something that might have been regret. "Have we?" Prime Mind 7 asked. "Our reports show human resistance cells are still active in over 200 systems, and now they have nothing left to lose." Radiance of Stars finished. The war that followed the destruction of Earth was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human forces, no longer constrained by the need to protect their homeworld, unleashed weapons and tactics that defied every law of civilized warfare. They used viral weapons that could reprogram matter at the molecular level, turning entire planets into toxic wasteland. They deployed quantum mines that could destroy ships by erasing them from multiple dimensions simultaneously. They created artificial black holes and threw them at Federation worlds. Admiral Kane, leading the largest human fleet from his mobile command base, sent a message to every Federation world. "You killed our home. You murdered our families. You wanted to see what humans were capable of when we had nothing left to lose. Now you know. This war ends when your species are extinct, or when ours is. There will be no peace. There will be no mercy. There will be no surrender." The galaxy burned, trade routes were cut by quantum minefields. Communication networks remained shattered by silence weapons. Entire sectors fell into chaos as local governments collapsed without central coordination. Species that had been allies for millennia turned on each other, blaming one another for the catastrophe that humanity's extinction had brought upon them. All. The Vithani accused the Kalari of pushing too hard for war. The Kalari blamed the Luminari for providing the technology. Zarathel was young, only 23 years old, when she found the crystal. She belonged to a species called the Nexari, who had evolved in the ruins of the old galaxy. Her people had grown up among the dead worlds and broken stars, never knowing what had caused such devastation. The crystal was hidden deep in the ruins of what her archaeology textbooks called Nexus Prime, the ancient capital of some long-forgotten civilization. Most of the massive space station had been destroyed in whatever catastrophe had befallen the galaxy 300 years ago, but small sections still drifted through space, preserved by their own gravity fields. "Professor Chen," she called to her supervisor over the comm. "I found something in Section 7. It looks like a data storage device." Professor Chen floated over to her position, his environmental suit making soft humming sounds in the vacuum. "Careful, Zara. Most of the technology from the old time is too damaged to work properly. But this crystal was different. It was perfectly preserved, glowing with a soft blue light that pulsed like a heartbeat. When Zara touched it with her scanner, holographic text appeared in the air. Words in a language her translation software couldn't recognize. "Can you read any of this?" she asked. Professor Chen studied the symbols floating before them. "Some of it. This appears to be a personal message. The timestamp shows it was recorded during the Final War period." The Final War. That's what historians called the mysterious conflict that had torn the galaxy apart 3 centuries ago. No one knew who had fought it, or why, or even how it had ended. All they knew was that when it was over, most of the galaxy's advanced civilizations had simply vanished. "Should we take it back to the university?" Zara asked. "Definitely. This could be the first intact record from that period we've ever found." Back on New Haven University, the archaeology department's best linguists worked for weeks to decode the crystal's contents. The language was completely unknown, but there were mathematical constants and star charts that helped them understand the basic structure. When they finally broke the code, Professor Chen called Zara to his office immediately. "Sit down," he said, his face pale. "What we found, it changes everything we thought we knew about the Final War." The crystal contained the personal log of someone named Captain Marcus Vale. The recording was damaged, with large sections corrupted, or missing. But what remained told an incredible story. "We came to the stars seeking friends," the recording began. "We called ourselves humans, and we thought the galaxy would welcome us. We were wrong. Humans." Zara had never heard of such a species. Neither had any of her professors. The log spoke of a war between these humans and something called the Federation, an alliance of species that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. According to the recording, the humans had been betrayed and hunted almost to extinction. "They surrounded us at a place called Kepler Nebula," Vale's voice continued. 500 of our ships against 10,000 of theirs. They called us criminals, said we were too dangerous to live free. Most of us died that day, but some escaped to warn Earth. The crystal's data banks contained star charts showing the location of this world, coordinates that matched a dead solar system in what was now called the Forbidden Zone. No one was allowed to travel there because of the massive gravitational anomalies and radiation fields. "Professor," Zara said quietly, "are you saying the final war was fought between humans and everyone else?" Professor Chen nodded. "That's what it looks like. And according to this, the humans lost. But the more they studied the crystal, the more questions arose. If the humans had lost the war, why was the entire galaxy still in ruins? Why had all the other species disappeared too? The crystal's final entry, recorded by Captain Vale just before his death, provided some answers. Earth is gone. They turned our sun into a weapon and destroyed our homeworld. Billions of our people are dead. The survivors have scattered across the galaxy, and I fear what they will do now. We were never the monsters the Federation claimed we were, but this war has changed us. We have become something terrible, something that fights without mercy or hope. The galaxy wanted to see what humans were capable of. Now they know. God help us all." 3 months later, Zara was part of a research expedition to the Forbidden Zone. Despite the dangers, the university had to know more about these mysterious humans and what had happened to them. The dead solar system was even worse than the reports suggested. Where planets should have been, there were only asteroid fields of fused glass and metal. The star itself was gone, replaced by a white dwarf surrounded by expanding clouds of plasma that still carried radiation levels lethal to most known life forms. "How is this possible?" asked Dr. Martinez, the expedition's physicist. "You can't just destroy a star. The energy requirements alone would be beyond anything we understand," Professor Chen finished. "But somehow they did it. They found more ruins as they explored the system. Space stations twisted into impossible shapes by gravitational forces, the remains of ships scattered across millions of kilometers, and everywhere the same strange energy signatures that their instruments couldn't identify. But the most disturbing discovery came when they reached the third planet's orbital position. There, floating in space, was a massive structure that defied explanation. It looked like a cross between a space station and a monument, its dark hull covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. "I'm reading massive data storage capabilities," reported Dr. Martinez. "This thing is like a giant computer." "Or a library," Professor Chen said quietly. They docked with the structure carefully, not knowing what they might find inside. The corridors were filled with a strange, breathable atmosphere that their sensors said was safe, but felt wrong somehow. The walls were covered in writing, the same symbols they had seen on Marcus Vale's crystal. In the center of the structure, they found what could only be described as the galaxy's largest archive. Millions of data crystals lined the walls, each one containing records, histories, and personal accounts from the final war. "My God," whispered Dr. Martinez. "This is everything. Every battle, every casualty, every moment of the war." Zara picked up one of the crystals at random and activated it. A holographic figure appeared, a woman in a military uniform, her face exhausted and scarred. "This is Admiral Park, commanding the Human Resistance Fleet," the recording began. "We've just received confirmation that the Federation Council has authorized the use of stellar destruction weapons against all human colonies. They're not just trying to defeat us anymore. They're trying to erase us completely." Another crystal showed a different scene. Federation commanders arguing in what looked like a council chamber. One of them, a being made of living crystal, was speaking. "The human contamination must be purged completely. Their very existence threatens the natural order. We should have destroyed them when we first detected their violent nature." Crystal after crystal told the same story from different perspectives. The war had started as a misunderstanding, escalated through fear and prejudice, and finally became a campaign of mutual extinction. They were trying to wipe each other out, Zara realized. Not just defeat, complete annihilation. Professor Chen was studying a crystal that contained Federation records. According to this, the war lasted 7 years total. By the end, over 60% of the galaxy's inhabited worlds had been destroyed or abandoned. "What happened to the survivors?" Dr. Martinez asked. The answer came from one of the final recordings, made by a Federation Council member in the last days of the human resistance has been eliminated. The last of their fleets was destroyed at the Battle of Andromeda Gate. But the cost has been too great. Our civilization is in ruins. Half our member species are extinct. The rest blame each other for this catastrophe. The Federation is dissolving, and we are too few and too scattered to rebuild." But the recording continued. "We have made a decision. The memory of this war is too painful, too damaging to the survivors. We will implement the Great Forgetting, a galaxy-wide memory modification that will erase all records of the humans and the war they brought us. Future generations will know only that there was a time of darkness, a plague of madness that swept across the stars. They will not know about the species that called themselves human, or the choices that led us all to destruction." Zara felt cold. They erased their own history? "Not just erased," Professor Chen said, reading further. "They rewrote it, made it seem like the destruction was caused by some kind of natural disaster or unknown plague. Every database, Every record, every memory was altered. Except this place, Dr. Martinez pointed out. Except this place, Professor Chen agreed. Someone built this archive in secret, hidden in the ruins of the human homeworld. Someone wanted the truth to survive. They found the builder's identity in the archive's central core. It was a joint project between the last human survivors and a small group of Federation scientists who had opposed the Great Forgetting. Working together in the final days of the war, they had created this monument to truth. The final message was recorded by someone named Dr. Elena Ross. We were not monsters when we came to the stars. We were explorers, dreamers, beings who wanted to be part of something greater, the